The controversy continues for former USC and NFL quarterback Mark Sanchez. He's already facing a felony charge. In surveillance video obtained by the New York Post, you can see Sanchez stumbling through downtown Indianapolis.
The man on the ground is a 69-year-old man. He's beaten pretty badly. That former NFL player, Mark Sanchez, has been stabbed.
This group out there that believe that no one should have to pay a bond. You should just go to jail and sign yourself out. In all the cities that's done that, it's been a total catastrophe. We as a society have a tendency to punish people for being rich.
I mean, we're talking about a complete fail from grace.
Hill of Justice is sponsored and produced by Jermaine Delmas Studios.
Let's set the scene. It's after midnight in Indianapolis. In an alleyway, you're hearing broken glass, you're listening to traffic in the background, and the hum of all types of, people walking, just going from here to there. Then you hear a struggle. Two men are fighting over a parking spot. One of them says to the other before the altercation, "You can't park there," by orders of management. And that resulted into an altercation of epic proportions. I mean, we're talking about a complete fail from grace in the media, probably of all time of 2025. So the man on the ground is a 69-year-old man. He's beaten pretty badly. And according to him, he takes pepper spray because the guy is much bigger than him, is hulking, and he pepper sprays him. And he said it got so bad that he had to stab him. The other man is walking around from that altercation aimlessly in the streets with stab wounds. But it gets even better than that. Much better than that. This guy, is then we get this contrast. So you got that contrast, you got another contrast. We get reports that former NFL player Mark Sanchez has been stabbed in Indianapolis downtown. We get reports a little bit after that, it trickles, that he is in stable condition in the Indianapolis hospital. And then from there, complete boom. So that's where we're at. I'm Jerome Hill. With me is Victor Hill, former retired sheriff. And we have now a firestorm going on. We have an individual who has now basically torpedoed his entire career, broadcasting career, as we find out that the other guy that was laying on the ground is recovering in a hospital, completely battered, deep gash on his face. I think the wound even went through his face and his mouth. And he is, of course, suing Fox Sports because Mark Sanchez was actually going to go ahead and broadcast and do color commentary on the game the day the day after, on Sunday. It doesn't materialize. So, brother, guess what?
What?
He gets out on bond. Take a guess.
What? He's OR, released on his own reconnaissance?
That would be outrageous on its too, but for $300. $300, which if you take a look at the calculations, probably 10%, $3,000. But we're talking about celebrity. We're talking about influence. I mean, is that a factor?
It's a two-edged sword. uh, celebrity factor can be good and it can be bad for the celebrity and for everybody else. Usually there's no balance. I think for the charges, whatever the bond is you normally give anyone should get. But usually what you see with celebrities is either too lenient or too harsh. It just goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. It's either, hey, he's a celebrity, let's give him a break, or, well, we got to prove we don't care who you are, so we're going to require this, and that. But remember this: the whole bond thing is under scrutiny anyway, because there's this group out there that believe that no one should have to pay a bond. You should just go to jail and sign yourself out. And all the cities that's done that, it's been a total catastrophe. What that bond is supposed to do is guarantee, or a form of guarantee, nothing is 100%, that a person is going to show up for court. And when they started doing these oral bonds, nobody showed up for court. And his situation is not really a situation of, can we find him or will he show up for court? Because it's hard to be a fugitive when you're a celebrity. It's hard to be a fugitive when you're not one, but when you're a celebrity, everyone knows what you look like. Where could an OJ had hide was for so long, even if he'd gotten away that day? You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So at the end of the day, this guy the question is, he could afford a high bond if they gave him one anyway. The question when they're writing a bond is they're trying to decide, is this bond sufficient enough, or is this person a flight risk? And sometimes they do give signature bonds because there's some people who, where they're going to go. So each situation is different. So you got to understand, I don't think, had they given him $100,000 bond or $1 million bond, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like whether he could afford it or not. The question is, will he show up for court? In his situation, he virtually has no choice. Where can he go and hide? Bonds are really designed for people who can disappear, and we have no way of catching up with them, and that's why they go to a bonding company, and they have to get all this information, and they have to do everything else. So we keep that in mind, that part of that decision could have been, is he a flight risk? And that's what bonds are, to deal with the level of flight risk of that particular individual. Not so much a fine. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, it's tantamount to a pair of designer sneakers, right?
Right.
And that's where you just take a look at this and you're like, that's kind of odd. Now, in his defense, he was initially the charge initially was a low-level charge.
Right.
And they charge it by levels in Indianapolis. And so, and that range is anywhere from $250 to maybe $750 for the low end of it. But, there's other areas in the world that I like to talk to you about, and maybe there needs to be some bond reform of some sort. What's your thoughts about bond reform?
Well, if you're talking about bond reform in the form that we've seen a lot of these folks talking about, we need to eliminate bond, or there needs to be no bond at all, it doesn't work. Every city that's done it has gone into absolute chaos. When I was sheriff, we had a judge account with the bright idea that a person could sign themselves out for simple possession of marijuana. They could sign themselves out for criminal trespass. They could sign themselves out for shoplifting. And it was another charge. But let me tell you how ridiculous it is. That means that a person, and the other one was minor criminal damage. So let's think about this for a second. Those are the 4 charges. And when they ask her, why did you do this? She said, well, a lot of people can't afford bonds, so I'm trying to work with them. Okay, let's think about this for a second. If you can sign yourself up for criminal damage, shoplifting, civil possession of marijuana, whatever, well, technically you could go to Walmart and steal, go to jail, sign yourself out, then go get mad and go back to Walmart and kick out a window, and then they'll take you back to jail, and then you can sign yourself out. And then you could go back to jail, then you can go back out and say, you know what, I'm stressed out, I've been to jail 3 times, let me smoke some weed, and then go in and sign yourself back out. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. What the bond is designed to do is to guarantee a return and be a deterrent, not for the return. So that means you got to put some skin in the game. Hey, I want to be free. I don't want to be in jail. Well, put up some skin in the game to show that you got a reason to come back. Because if you don't come back, you're going to lose some money.
Mhm.
Is it 100%? No. But when all a person has to do is walk into jail and say, hurry up and give me my paperwork so I can sign my way out, it has been complete chaos. And she literally had to reverse that. But then you see situations like what's going on in the same county where the sheriff starts ORing a whole bunch of people because everyone's afraid to be in a jail because people are getting killed. So, okay, well, let me OR all these people so that they don't get killed on my watch. And now what you've done is release a whole bunch of criminals in the street. I'm not a big fan of releasing people unless their time is done. Um, I'm not saying they can't get good time credit, but let's give you a good example with COVID. I was the only sheriff in Georgia that didn't release everybody during COVID, and I caught scrutiny for it. And of course, the media and different people put out lies and they'll say, well, there's a COVID outbreak there. It wasn't. We had less than 1%. But let's think logically about this. Let's just say I did have a COVID outbreak in my jail. What sense would it make to release everybody so they can spread COVID to all of the other people out there? None. If we did really have a COVID outbreak, which we did not, and that was proven, we could contain it and treat it there. And then what ended up happening, it's an interesting case study in leadership and when to release people from jail or not. The crime went up everywhere around Clayton County, but it didn't go up there because most sheriffs wouldn't even accept an inmate unless it was murder or it had to be murder, rape, or robbery. But anything else, you could steal a car, you could do whatever. Well, we're not putting you in jail. And everyone knew that, so they just did whatever they wanted to do. But in Clayton County, everyone was required to come in. So you got to be very, very careful with that. Now, I'm not a proponent either of locking up people and throwing away the key, you know. And I'm
Mm.
not a proponent of jail overcrowded. I'm not a proponent for over sentencing people. But at the same time, when you're talking about a person who hasn't gone to court yet and may never show up to court, there has to be something there to encourage them to show up to court. If not, you get chaos and you get higher crime. No one has
Right.
proven any differently.
So, so let's talk about our friends across the pond. Let's talk about some European countries.
That's a big pond.
That is a big pond. And shout out to all of our subscribers and the people who comment and like from across the pond. And we have several of them out there. So we want to talk about your neck of the woods. There are several European countries that use something called a day fine. And basically, these day fine systems, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, they're also called income based fines or bail. That's where the penalty or bail is pegged on the offender's income rather than the flat dollar amount like we have over here in the US. So that idea of punishment what they're thinking of is it should sting equally for the rich and also for the poor. And so some countries that do that is Finland. They have something called a day fine system, and it is pretty remarkable. And so it's not uncommon when a millionaire gets $100,000 fine for speeding. That's gone viral out there.
Hmm.
And what's your thoughts about, of course, for a $300 fine for somebody who's poor, that's crushing. That's a brick on them. But, I'm not opposed to that. I think that's pretty good.
Well, let me say this. I do believe that if a person is challenged financially, that it should be a bond that they can make, but a bond that she should take seriously. Because, like you say, giving a guy that only makes $10,000 a year $1 million bond, that's not fair. But then again, at the same time, we as a society have a tendency to punish people for being rich. And, well, we got a very rich brother. You know who he is.
Right.
And I've seen some very crazy things. I've seen people, because they know he has money, they want to charge him more for a service than they would charge somebody else because he has money. That's not right. When he goes through the drive-through at McDonald's, he pays the same thing for a Happy Meal that anybody else pays. He pays a fair market value. He doesn't pay $100 for a Happy Meal because he has a whole lot of money. So I'm not too sure about, well, if you're richer, you should pay more. I think everybody should probably pay what's reasonable to guarantee their return. And then also, it's not just a matter of money. It's also whether a person is a flight risk.
Hmm.
Sometimes people bond have to be higher because they are flight risk. If we want to take the chance of letting you out, we're going to have to require a higher bond because you've escaped before, or you have the ability or something like that. But excuse me. But to charge a person more because he's rich, a lot of people find this hard to believe. The majority of the people aren't in that 10% of gazillionaires, and there can be resentment for that sometimes when people find themselves in positions where they have prosecuting powers, rather. Sorry about that. Judges or whatever. Sometimes there's this thing is we've got to prove that just because you got money or you got fame and power, we're not going to be easier on you. We're going to be extra hard. Well, that's not fair either. Say that we got to punish a
But
person.
how? I
Yeah,
mean, how?
but
Because we're talking about you know equality and equity. I mean, if I am a high net worth individual, $100 million, $100,000 speeding ticket is not going to bother me one way or another.
But why does he have to pay $100,000 speeding ticket if another person has to pay $100? He doesn't have to pay $100,000 for a Happy Meal when he goes to McDonald's. You saying that we saying if that's the case, why don't we charge him more for a Happy Meal than anybody else because they got the financial means? It's not fair,
Because that's
Jerome.
a commodity that you want, as opposed to a fine that you pay because you broke the law. So
Okay,
it should
but
be
you
equally
broke the
yoked.
same law that this other guy broke. So I could see you saying that, okay, if everyday people have to pay a $3,000 bond, why does a celebrity pay a $300 bond? I could see that. But then why is it that he has to pay a $300,000 bond when everyday people pay a $3,000 bond? You're punishing a person for being rich. And then
No,
you remember, and that
I
gets
get that. I think
that gets to this lawfare thing. Like, okay, are some of these prosecutors prosecuting people because they actually committed a crime, or they prosecuting them because of who they are? Are they prosecuting them because they're afraid they're going to win an election? And well, he's powerful, he'll win the election. And we won't even go into that because I've had personal experiences with that. When
mhm.
we start prosecuting people for who they are, when we start charging people based on their income, well, you got more money. That's still a form of discrimination, and it's not right.
Yeah, but you're conflating the two, because if you really want to take a look at it, you're taking it. The law is already set, so that's the even ground right there, right? So yeah, I agree with you. We shouldn't be going after people who are celebrities because they're just a celebrity, or somebody who's just rich because they're just rich, or somebody's who's famous and we make them infamous. But where does it come to? How does a $300 fine, like this situation, for somebody who, where is, if you take a look at the fact that what is the design of the fine? It is supposed to go ahead and make you think twice about doing that. Well,
We're
it
not talking
would for
about a
somebody who's
fine.
foreign.
We're talking about a bond. A bond is assuring that a person shows up in court. You don't get fined until it's adjudicated and you're either found guilty, and then part of your punishment may be a fine. So maybe then, because usually when they do that, they look at a person's financial status before the judge decides to fine. There's this pre-sentencing thing that they do. But when you're talking about a bond, okay, if everyday guys are paying $3,000 to get out on a charge he got out on, then I agree. Why should he pay $300? I agree with that. But I also don't agree that he should pay $300,000 if that charge is usually a $3,000 bond. Whatever the charge is, that's what it needs to be. Just like whatever a Happy Meal is. If I hit the lottery tomorrow, does that mean I have to pay $1,000 for a Happy Meal? I pay the fair market value that everybody else pays for the Happy Meal. But see, that's what we do. Sometimes there's this resentment. Well, they got money, I don't have money. Well, he needs to pay more. And I've seen that, and I've seen that with we got a very close friend who's very rich, and I've seen people try and charge him 5 to 10 times what they would charge anybody else just because he has the money. But they're not going to render him any more service to him than they're going to render to the other person. They just know he has the ability, and that's not right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at a suspended license. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and most people, if depending on the officer, they have discretion. They can go ahead and take that person's liberty and put them in jail. Okay, so there's going to be a bond there, right? We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about murder. I mean, I agree with you that if we're talking about the most egregious of crimes, maybe there should be some type of, there's got to be a set limit there for everyone, right? But when you're talking about lower level things, I'm not quite sure if that's equally yoked in that sense. And I know that's a disagreement we'll continue to keep on having. But you're going to be paying fines and you're going to be paying the bond to get out from jail anyway, right? So I mean, what would be the harm of income based if we brought some of the
Because it's
European
financial
models?
discrimination. If you and I have a parking ticket and we both park in a no parking zone,
Mm-hmm.
you pay $10 for the ticket and I pay $100. That whatever the fine is for that, the fine is. It gets back to the Happy Meal. I'm not trying to pick on Ronald McDonald, but
Mm-hmm.
when rich people go through the line at McDonald's, they pay the same thing for a Happy Meal everybody else pays. If
Mm-hmm.
we say they got to pay far more, that's it. And also, let me tell you one thing. I never had a problem with this. If we're going to say that I pay 10% on all my taxes, and everyone pays 10% on their taxes on their income or whatever, well then that's fair. It's just I'm paying more because I make more, but the number is the same. It's 10%. So if you make 100 grand and I make 250 grand, we know whatever we make, we're paying 10%. No different than you go to church, you tithe 10% or whatever. Everybody is tithing about the same. If you feel the more in your heart, of course, you can do what our preachers refer to as sacrificial giving. But the standard is okay, you're going to give 10% to the church. So the standard is okay, the guy that's making 50 grand, he gives 10%, whatever. Okay, that's understandable. So if you got more money, you can give more because 10% of what you make is more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But to give out a parking ticket and say, well, the rich people got to pay more for parking than the guy who's not rich, that's a reverse discrimination.
Okay,
To say
let's talk
right.
about.
Okay, and
Okay,
that's
so
that
you.
holding people to a higher standard. Why are we holding people to a higher standard? I've never agreed with holding cops or anyone to a higher standard. I think they should be held to the same standard. But
Mhm.
because just because you're a politician or a cop, why are you held to a higher standard? You're still human. You're not perfect. I think you should be held to the same standard, but why higher? Because you a politician, because you're rich. Well, everyone gets 5 years in prison, but you got to get 10 because we're holding you to a higher standard. We're punishing you for your what? Your success. You're a successful person, so you should be more perfect than everybody else. So we're going to hold you to a higher standard. That's a bunch of bullshit. Excuse my language. Go ahead.
No, but then what you're saying also on top of that is that if we're going to talk about deterrence, so you got that same person paying $20 for a parking ticket, and of course, that's going to that's for somebody who isn't wealthy, that's going to be a bite out of their pocket. But what do I care if I pay $20? I'd rather go ahead and pay that and just be like, blah, blah, blah. What type of deterrent is that? If
The,
you can
the,
go ahead
the,
and do that at all.
the deterrent should be don't miss park or don't speed, but to say, okay, listen, we're going to give you a discount every time you break the law because you don't make this particular type of money. How we know you're not evading taxes? You could be making $100,000 in tips and don't report it because it's cash. But you know what? You only report $20,000. So I tell you what, you can pay $20 for breaking the law. This dude over here, Oh, aren't you got a lot of money? You know what? No, we want $2,000 for that. That's
Hmm.
reverse discrimination, man. It's not right. Just like you can discriminate against people for being poor or whatever, rich people can be discriminated against too. And we see it all the time. Of course, no one really feels sorry for them. Well, they got all that money, so what? It's still not right.
The reason why I brought that up is they did that to us in Colombia.
Meaning, I don't,
I'm just telling
bring
you.
back my.
So I'm just saying. I'm just putting
Oh,
that
I
out
know
there.
exactly what you're talking about. You're
Yeah.
right. And remember, I was complaining about it. I
Hmm.
said I want to pay the price that Colombians pay. I don't want to pay what Americans pay. I got pesos, right? Right.
Hmm.
So why am I paying? And you and I complained about that, and that is not right. Just because they're doing it is not right for them to say, well, those Americans, their dollar is worth $10 here. We're going to charge them 10 times more. No, that's why we found a guide to help us. Hey, we want to pay what everybody else would pay, not be
Hmm.
taken advantage of. So it's the same thing. Because over there, I guess we're rich. You know what I'm saying? So it's
That's
the
how it
same
was.
thing.
Yeah.
And right. And
Hmm.
that's why I'm saying it's not right. It
Hmm.
wasn't right what happened to us. It is not right what happens to our rich brother. It's not right. He should pay the same thing for a Happy Meal everybody else pay.
Yeah. Shout out to Jacob, 50 years old, from Denmark. I know that he and his family watch us over there. So I just wanted to go ahead and say that. But it does get down to, that you got Denmark doing that. You have Germany doing that. You have Sweden doing that. And I know it doesn't play well in the United States, but, you know, we fall into the flat scheduled fees, and this is what it's based out of. So I just have to say this at the end. If Sanchez lived in Finland, his bail would have been $300. That could have been well over to the excess of $30,000. And so I understand your point isn't to punish the wealth in itself, but how do we go ahead and make sure that the law stings equally for individuals that have access and that have the ability to do that, and they're not deterred?
Really, that's supposed to be a judge's job. A judge is supposed to look at every individual, look at their, when you set in a bond, you're looking at, okay, does he have an address? Does he have employment? Does he have a family? Does he have stable stuff? There's more to it than how much they make. And
Hmm.
I don't know how you can verify a person's salary when you arrest them anyway. I
Hmm.
mean, usually when you see that type of stuff, they have to provide documents, tax, whatever. But what the judge has to do is make a determination based on this person's family status, social status, or whatever. Is he a flight risk? If there's a guy that's married, he's lived at this house for 30 years, uh, he has equity in the house, of course. He's been on the same job for 30 years. It's not likely he's going to disappear.
Hmm.
So that bond can be cheap because he's not really a flight risk. But then if there's somebody that's unstable, we don't really have an address, they've got a criminal history. We've never, they haven't shown up to court when we show, when we look at their criminal history and they've had to issue bench warrants, then that has to be higher because he's a flight risk. So it's not so much the person's wealth, but it's whether they're a flight risk or not.
Hmm.
And if it's a flight risk, then it needs to be high enough where either they can't afford it or if they come up with it, somebody got something on them to say, hey, I'll put this up for you, but you're gonna have to wear this ankle monitor. You're gonna have to wear something because you're a flight risk. If I
Hmm.
put this money up, excuse me, that's what it's really about. It's not about the person's wealth. It's about
Hmm.
whether or not they're a flight risk or not.
Right, right, right. So, I bring that into it. I mean, but he has bigger problems than that. So,
No
of
doubt.
course, his employment is in jeopardy. If not, he was probably already at the time of this taping, he was probably already told, you know what, we'll see you later. We're going to characterize it as some type of retirement that you're going to be focusing on your health and your family and so on and so forth. But they have morality causes. And so at this point in time, of course, he's looking at jail time on that. Will he get it? I don't know. It depends on depends on a couple other factors too. I guess his blood will come back to see if he had alcohol in it, if he had other substances inside him. It depends on the defense too, because we could take a look at maybe he took some type of prescribed narcotics and it mixed up with something he drank. There's so many things that will happen, but I can tell you right now, as the face of Fox right now, he played football for a long time. He knows what a playbook looks like. But I assure you, Fox has their own crisis playbook, and they
Yeah,
are looking at him hard about this.
they do. But you know what's crazy about the whole thing? And I'm not saying that that's not a legitimate point, but it's amazing that if he worked at Burger King and this happened and he got out on bond, they would tell him, "Hey, go on back and fry these burgers until your court case." You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Or whatever. So, it's mighty interesting that there's certain professions where if you get in trouble, you can't go back and earn a living no more because there's this perception. But then there's other people who they have jobs and hey, they're trying to get them out so they can come back and get to work because we got work to get done. That's something we got to discuss one day too. I don't know how fair that is either because even though you're out on bond and even though the world may think you're guilty and you may well be guilty, you still need to work because you got to pay attorneys and you may have to pay that fine, that outstanding fine based on your income. So, when we tell people they can't work
Mhm.
anymore because they got a criminal charge, that's very interesting too. A lot of people get financially devastated because once they get a criminal charge, now that job won't allow them to work and it's hard to find another job. And when it
Mhm.
gets real crazy is when these people are innocent. We got a lot of crazy prosecutors out there, ask me how I know, that will make up a charge nobody never even heard of.
Mhm.
And now they have things in place where during that time you don't have an income. So you're already proven guilty before you can prove your innocence when it's supposed to be the exact opposite. So that's another form of financial punishment. Now, I'm not saying the guy ain't guilty. Sounds that way. But
Mhm.
if you're presumed innocent until proven guilty, why can't you go back to work until you go to trial?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because Keith, if I came up to you and had you sign a morality clause, and I'm saying, guess what? You worked 9 months, and you're going to go ahead and get paid $2 million. I need you to shut up and don't go ahead and find yourself in problems. You're
I,
going to
s-
do that.
I see what you're saying. And in a situation like this, I mean, this is probably a prima facie case. I'm not, something is
Mhm.
wrong. But look at people who get accused of stuff they didn't do. Look at
Sure.
people, right. And, and then you're accused of something. Now you got to prove your innocence. And now you can't make a living.
Mhm.
That's something that needs to be revisited too. That might
Yeah.
not be the case with this guy, but it's
Mhm.
been the case with a lot of people I've seen, and I've experienced that before. That's
Yeah.
something to think about.
And they're sure. I mean, when you're the face of corporate, and you're given that type of money and influence, they're gonna have you sign something. So,
Right, but suppose somebody makes up a charge on you.
well,
Suppose
that's
you're
happened to
innocent.
others too, and that's
Right,
another for another
right. So
discussion.
that means I can't have an income no more, and I can't support my family or pay for my legal fees. That
Yeah.
needs to be
No.
revisited. Again, we're punishing people for fame. We're punishing them for wealth. If they're guilty, fine. But you're holding them to a standard you don't hold other people for, and you're punishing them for their success.
Right. Right. So
All
that's
right.
why investigations are important. We're going to go ahead and land this plane. I wanted to go ahead and shout out to everyone that has helped us in this community. Please continue to subscribe, like, comment on our platforms, and particularly on YouTube. We do respond to those, and we really appreciate that. Without further ado, that's Victor Hill. I'm Jerome Hill. We're out.